now that we're settled, let's get into something real. Porque this one is close to the heart. What I thought was breaking me was actually shaping me. Let's get into the why. Every experience holds a lesson. In 2017, I lost a very important person to me. Best human being, my grandmother. We used to call her Nani. This experience happened to me while I was amidst a career change. For the past 6 years of my life, I had been some type of manager, whether it was fast food, leading into restaurant management. I had became very successful in the restaurant world, and it was great for the age I had, right? I was excited that I was learning new things, I was climbing up the corporate ladder, and it was pretty good money for a 23-year-old, 24-year-old. But I had an experience that changed my path. I went to a school to get a haircut, and I got talked into enrolling. So I did, and everything changed. But also, while I was in school, I got a phone call that forever changed my life. This phone call was to tell me that my grandmother was not okay. She was unwell. I didn't understand the severity of the situation. I think my family was trying not to alarm me because at this point I was living in Vegas. I was in the new beginning I had created for myself. And I took it lightly. Again, the setup for that news was a lot to take in, but light enough for me not to worry. So I stayed in contact with my family through the situation, and everyone seemed pretty relaxed around what was happening until things took a turn for the worst. And from everything being kind of okay, it was an instant 360 circle of everything's not okay and you need to come home now. And I was shooken up. I don't know, I can't even explain that. I just knew I had to pack and leave. In that moment when I heard that statement of you need to come home now, I was ready to leave everything behind again that I had built because my family needed me. Again, a response from, stuff that's instilled from you in the past. But I did things the right way. I went to school the next day. I told them the situation, and I was able to take a 10-day leave of absence from school. I couldn't take more than 10 days because at the 11th day, they would submit paperwork for termination from my school. So I would forfeit all the hours I had put into cosmetology school. And I did the paperwork, they fast-tracked it, everything got approved by the end of the day, and I jumped on a plane and I flew home. I didn't know that I was gonna stay all 10 days. I literally bought a one-way. And there was no way I could go back after walking into that hospital setting. It was honestly one of the hardest things I think I've endured in life. Walking into seeing someone you love so dearly on life support is just something that nobody prepares you for. Oh, sorry, I said I wasn't gonna cry. But it was a lot again to take in. And I had to deal, but I had never had to deal with something that hard. So my instant response was to suppress and try to move on. I pushed my feelings to the side in that moment, and it was all right. I'm here. What do we have to do? What are the nurses saying? What are the doctors saying? What are we doing? How do we move on from this? And it wasn't what my family needed. My family just needed me. But I didn't know how to be me in that moment. But I stayed. I stayed for the 10 days, as long as it allowed me. My grandma wasn't fully gone. She had a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. It is an autoimmune disorder that tackles your nervous system. So she was paralyzed pretty much, and there's a very small percentage of people that it progresses backwards. So usually GBS progresses from your toes up to your brain. For my grandma, that wasn't the case. It progressed from her brain down to her toes. So when I was there, she could still hear us and she could still move her toes. So I came up with this system that she could answer yes or no questions, and if it was a yes, wiggle your toes, and if it was a no, move them side to side. So for 10 days I was able to communicate with her until I had to leave. And then I went home with a heavy heart because when I said bye to her, she kept wiggling her toes no, to not leave her, to not go. But I had to, so I explained to her that I was just gonna go back for one day, because all I needed to do was go back for one day so that I could check into school and reprocess my LOA, my leave of absence. But things didn't happen that way. I went home and I had to stay for a week because obviously I was married at the time also. My husband at the time was working so that he could pay the bills back at home. I was in school. I had taken the time out to go back home, and things were about to get hard. But a week later, I get a call that we've reached the end of the line, that a decision had to be made. And I lose it. How can we decide that it was time to let go? How do we tell the doctor that we needed to let our loved one go? But I hopped on a plane, I came home, I landed in San Diego, I get picked up at the airport, my sister and my mother. We drive straight to the hospital and we let go. Me and my sister in the room, my mom in the waiting room. She couldn't handle it, and it was tough, but we knew she was gone. And I walked into the room before she was gone. It wasn't my grandmother anymore. It was just her body. And I started to learn how loss works, and it's hard. It isn't easy, and it's okay not to be okay. And it hurts. It always hurts when you love somebody and they leave this earth. It always hurts because you always miss them. Sometimes you wish you could reach for the phone and call and just hear their voice one more time, or get that last piece of advice. Feel their warm embrace. Show up to grandma's house and have her cooking. But that's just not how life works sometimes, you know? And I learned in 2017 that loss hurts. So I started grieving. And that moves me towards my next chapter. And this experience limited my grieving process. This all has happened in March, and I was just about 7 months into grieving. I was still trying to accept what had happened. I was still angry that it happened. I was confused. I was broken. I was far away from my family. I wasn't myself. And this caused my marriage to fall apart. Because when somebody doesn't understand that you're grieving and they expect you to just be okay, it changes you. So I went through a separation process. My marriage reached a boiling point. It wasn't just the grieving. There had been previous issues, infidelities. We weren't seeing eye to eye. We grew apart rather than growing together, and that's okay, you know. We were probably too young to just own up to the fact that we weren't in love anymore, and we were sticking it out just because we were married. But just because it wasn't love anymore doesn't mean it didn't hurt. So after losing a loved one physically, then I lost a loved one emotionally. And just because we weren't in love doesn't mean we didn't love each other. We just knew we weren't going to work out anymore. There was bad decisions that were made, and I kind of reached that boiling point again, and I was fed up. So I graduated by this point. I was okay working, and I packed my stuff, and I called a friend. Shout out to that friend, you know who you are. If you're watching, miss you. She came in her white truck and helped me haul my stuff in and drop me off at the Amtrak. And she asked, how long are you going to be gone this time? And I said, forever. And she said, no. And I said, yes. And I gave her a hug, and she was the only one that knew that I was leaving. And I hopped on a Greyhound and cried my whole way home. But it was the decision of choosing myself, because I was unhappy. I hadn't finished processing what I had experienced earlier in that year. Somebody who was supposed to make things easier for me was making them harder. It was just time to start all over, a new beginning. And I started seeing, new beginnings are part of life. Just because you say no to something or end something, it's not always running away. And I used to feel like that, like I was acting cowardly because I would choose myself, because we're taught to always be there for others. When you choose yourself, it feels unnatural, and then you get all these self-doubt thoughts, and I kept thinking, oh, well, I'm running away from these issues. I'm running away. But it wasn't running. It was choosing myself to be in a better place. Now, was I completely dealing with them? Maybe not, because I didn't know how. And these were the moments that were teaching me how to do it. And that's what I'm here sharing, why I'm here sharing. But that leads us to the next topic. And in this topic, we're going to address something that was probably one of the hardest experiences in my life. This would be my rise and my fall and hitting my rock bottom. Two and a half years I worked. I worked hard. I moved to San Diego. I dealt with a divorce long distance. That was a mess on its own. That I thought was rock bottom, but nope, trust me, when you think it's there, you can always go further. But I worked 2 years and a half, busted my butt, came to San Diego, got my license. I had to retest because I couldn't get reciprocity, or however you say that word, I don't know how to say it. I couldn't transfer my license. But I couldn't transfer my license because when you get licensed in the State Board of California requires you to be a cosmetology license holder for 3 years before you can transfer it, and then just pay the fee and get your license. So I had to book a new test. I had to drive up to, well, not even drive. I took the train, stayed with a friend, and took the bus and tested for 7 hours to get my California license. For cosmetology, and 2 years and a half I grinded hard. This time I made the decisions, I took on a 9 to 5, 4 days a week. I was working a serving job, and on my time off between that, I was building clientele. I was in a shop, so I was working. One job to pay the bills, one job to have fun, the other one to build my business, right? So I'm busting my butt, keep going. I reached the point of success where I am generating a lot of money, and I'm working behind the chair. I have a great clientele. Shout out to my royal fam, love you girlies if you're watching, kisses. But I was living the life. I was 28, 29 years old. I was single. I was partying. I had an assistant. I had a little studio. I opened a studio in Little Italy. And then I moved back to Bonita. And then I ended up leasing a house that was beyond what I thought I could ever afford. I had the parties at the house every weekend. I was king of the world. Honestly, it's what I felt like, and I think my arrogance showed. Because I will say, except now, I kind of was a little cocky, and I mean, who wouldn't be? I went from leaving everything to building this for myself. But in this experience of climbing to the top, you know how they always say it's lonely at the top? There's a reason for that saying. It's not because not everybody's at the top, but it's because you need to be mindful of who you take to the top with you. That was my mistake. My mistake was growing and not outgrowing at the same time. But the universe has a funny way of teaching you the lessons that are meant for you. You can't escape them. You can make the mistake, but you best believe the lesson's coming. When I thought I had it all, I was faced with the hardest choice. I had to cut people out of my life. This meant letting go of 2 friendships that meant absolutely the world to me. Absolutely the world to me. These are friendships that I'm talking about 17 years long, 13 years long. It was just energies that were not aligned to me anymore. There was a disconnect, we'll call it. And because I failed to let go of these friendships sooner, I should have let go the first time. But I made excuses. Because we have a big heart, because we're kind, because whatever it was. I always had an excuse to forgive, ignore, turn a blind eye to. But this was just my codependency and my fear of loss. I was tired of always being alone. I knew how much it hurt to lose something. And because of that, I failed to release what was past its time until it was time. You know, the universe showed me that it was time in its way. And then came the ultimatum. And it was to stay and watch everything I've built burn to the ground, including me, or to walk away and choose to leave everything I built behind. Now, if you're listening, both decisions, I was going to be left with nothing. One was going to be a very hard lesson to learn, and the other was a hard choice to make. I was tired of learning lessons. And if I was able to see that lesson coming my way, why not choose to release what's time to let go of and move? This move was a big move. At the time, my mom had an offer from the job she was currently at because the company relocated. And that meant we were moving 2,000 miles away from California. So I looked at my mom and I said, take the job, let's go. So we packed up my Kia Sorento, sold everything in my home, everything, to the last fork and spoon. I jumped in a car and I drove for 31 hours. It took us like 3 days. We made some stops along the way. That was my new beginning. Whew. Well, that was a lot to take in, wasn't it? I know. Let's take our 3-minute meditation moment. Ready? We're gonna breathe in and out, and in and out. Last one with the strong breath out and in and release. All right, let's roll our shoulders back. Now forward. Now our neck. Ooh. Now let's reach high up and stretch. Well, now that we released some of that tension, let's move forward. Um, Tennessee wasn't the end. Like I said, it was a new beginning. I was applying my knowledge from the past experiences to my new experiences. I was on my healing path. By choosing me, I learned that I was leaving behind, let's see, I was leaving behind repeating cycles, bad habits. Trust me, you pick a few of those up along the way. Energies that did no longer serve my purpose, or they no longer aligned with the path I was on. People resented that, but I was okay with it. That's their experience to deal with, you know. I realized that my worth was more than my material world. I stopped giving power to what I owned, and I started giving worth to who I was. That was a powerful moment for me. It wasn't so much about what I had, how much I made, what I dressed in. It was who I was healing, who I was helping, where my faith stood. And that made all the difference. Again, I was choosing me. As we wrap up this moment, I want to leave you with our weekly mantra. I am the author of my own strength. My pen protects my peace. Alright, let's say that one time together. I am the author of my own strength, and my pen protects my peace. Thank you for joining me for another Mr. M moment. I hope to see you next week. Remember, build momentum one moment at a time.